Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 69th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-hosts Bryant W and Scotty N. Today's topic is hope. Can you tell us what that means to you, Bryant, and why you would like to talk about this today?
Sure thing. Good to see you both. Always grateful to have a discussion like this about topics that seem to evolve as we open our mind to sort of concepts and things that had a specific meaning to us before, but seem to be kind of changing as we change. And this word, like a few other words, has taken on a sort of a different meaning to me and how it has affected my life. So that word before was full of dreams. You know, I have to admit, I was someone that very much from childhood till I came into probably this phase of my life, always anticipated certain things happening in my life that I was hopeful would happen, that I thought would be the determining factors as to whether I was happy or not, or if I was feeling like I was living a meaningful life, or, you know, I don't know. I guess it was really based on external factors for most of my life. And I definitely remember losing what that word meant to me along the way. I recall becoming quite hopeless and kind of losing that zest and that anticipation and that drive. The best word I like to use for it is ambition. I know what it's like to feel those things sort of kind of slip out of the periphery of, like, I don't know, just getting into that everyday life, feeling like, oh, wow, like I may not ever achieve this, or I may not ever, you know, have that experience. And I remember feeling like early on in life, like, oh man, these things are slipping out of my hands. And I felt less and less confident. I felt like my life was becoming more and more unmanageable. And so I'll just nip it in the bud, and I'll say that that word now has completely different meaning. My motivations have changed fundamentally as to what I consider healthy kind of quality of life. So that term has changed tremendously for me. And it's something that I regained when I went through the process of walking through, you know, getting sober and all the other gifts that come with that.
Beautifully put, brother, and great to see you. I'm so glad to be here with both of you again. Scotty, would you just like to lay out a little bit of what hope means to you and why you were happy to come discuss that today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I chose hope for today because we were talking about going along spiritual principles.
Mhm.
And hope was the first spiritual principle I felt.
Mm.
So when I first came to recovery, it's funny. My stepdad ended up taking me to my first meeting, and I was a mess, right? I didn't come into recovery because my life was good.
Huh.
And I remember feeling better leaving that meeting than when I went in. That's I can still remember the meeting. I don't remember what was said in detail or anything like that. But I remember leaving that meeting feeling better than when I went in. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't think that all my problems were solved or anything like that. But then when I got a bit more time, I realized that I was feeling hope in that meeting.
Mm.
And that hope was very fundamentally that maybe the pain can go away.
Mm.
That was it. It wasn't that I would get clean. It wasn't that I would get sober. It wasn't that I would stop drinking or stop doing drugs. Any of that stuff. Because if I could have kept doing that stuff and not been in pain, then I probably would have,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, so that's the first thing I felt, and it's something that I've hung on to uh, over the years, and it has changed. And I'll talk about that changes a bit later in another talking point, but that's why I chose because it was the first spiritual principle that I felt that really struck a chord,
Mhm.
and it's what kept me going back to meetings because um, I would feel better after a meeting than before a meeting. That's all I really knew.
I think
Mhm.
that's a great reason for wanting to talk about that today. And it caused me to reflect back to my early recovery. And it probably was the first spiritual principle that I felt. My friend Andrew says that the only two spiritual principles that you can give to someone else are love and hope. And
Mhm.
and I really I like that a lot. And inside my addiction, I think that I was oh, this is a little bit hot. This way, let me bring that down. Inside my addiction, I think, that hope was an expectation factory for me. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I rolled into town, just full of expectations about other people. And it was always
Mhm.
started with, I hope they do this, you know,
Mhm.
and I had no tools for living presently. And really, like, I, I just don't think I even had the knowledge that I wasn't, you know, because I was just kind of scrambling around in survival mode, fight or flight.
Yeah.
Fight or flight was the last 6 months for me, really. Like the absolute, like I was in a lot of anxiety about things because things were getting worse and worse and worse in my life. And trying to put on that facade of me being okay was harder and harder and harder. And
Mhm.
like I had no I had no hope that I was going to control myself anymore. you know like I realized how badly I was failing, and then ending up that night in the hospital and my heart stopping. It was like my first glimmer of hope was opening my eyes the next morning and feeling like, that's like a kind of a relief in a
Mhm.
beat down organic surrender of like, I don't have to do this anymore.
Mhm.
Like I've
Mhm.
lost. I'm
Mhm.
in full defeat now.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and it was basically like, an ultimatum of my family of like, either you go to treatment or you're not coming home,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and in that period, I had to, I cleaned out for 13 days at home before I got to options finally, because I had to organize my work so that there was something to come back to. And I know that might sound really weird for people, but I am so glad that that happened to me and that I was able to do that, because I know a lot of people, like, for me, like going for treatment was a loan. Like I had to put that on a credit card just to get through it. And it was really expensive. And then I
Mhm.
know people who showed up at options who slept for a week. Like that would have been like sleeping for 5 grand. Like literally
Mhm.
the most expensive hotel you could put yourself in. But also, my brain was functioning at day 13 when I rolled in there a lot better than it was at day one. And,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so first of all, I was scared shitless going into treatment. I thought, man, I'm going to be with a whole bunch of addicts and not seeing that most addicts are probably just like me, gone through a ringer and
Mhm.
in a tough spot. But, I didn't know what to expect. And then I get there and see these people, like, because pretty much everybody there, except for one guy who arrived the same day as me, had been there 4 to 6 weeks, and they were well advanced in their steps. They were like smiling, and they were like learning. They were able to read.
Mhm.
Like that first little bit
Mhm.
in recovery, reading was like really hard. And and right away, like I was like, whoa, like I don't know what they're doing here, but this works. Like just shut up and do what they tell you, you know,
Mhm.
was really how I felt. And we went to a meeting that night and a meeting the next day, and I saw all these people smiling and talking, laughing, thinking like their brains were working, and they were like rolling in cars and having jobs and walking in with partners and laughing, and I was like, whoa. So then a little bit of hope happened right there of like, wow. And then day 3, it was Shirley's 16th birthday. And Johnny called Shirley and said, "Hey man, can we bring the crew from options just to see?" He's like, "I think it would be, a good hope shot." I remember him saying that on the phone. And I was like, got there, and that was it for sure. Like the long-term birthdays. Anybody who's new out there and you hear somebody having birthdays, go to 100 of them. Like there's a lot of hope for a newcomer in a bunch of multi-year birthday parties. At
Mhm.
least for me, there was, like it really, proof is in the pudding for people who were talking about living on the streets. And now, 15, 16 years later, like their life being a complete 180 and driving fast in the other direction. And,
Mm.
to see that they're not craving anymore and they're not jonesing anymore. And like right when we're starting in recovery, just that feeling of like, hey, I could have life without obsessing and craving. Like that is almost like a false promise. Like I'm like, no way, you know?
Mhm.
Mm.
So I'm gonna leave that there. BW, do you want to ask the first question to Scotty?
Sure thing. Um, okay. Well, we kind of covered this, but I think there's a perfect opportunity to elaborate. So the question I had was, when in your journey of getting clean or sober, did you realize what hope truly is, and how is it different now?
Mm. All right. So that actually ties into my next talking point, but because it's out in the air, I think we should talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that hope started to change for me. Um, so hope in the beginning was just that I hope I can get clean, right?
Uh-huh.
And the rest of the things didn't really matter. As I was getting clean, I started to have hope about other areas of my life
Yeah.
that, right, that maybe improvements could be made. Um, the big thing was, and I talked about it last episode too, like in my early recovery, I was dealing with a bit of psychosis, right? So I had I had resigned myself that it wouldn't get better. So I lost hope there.
Okay.
But but and that's a big but. So when I was around year 4 or 5, um, I started practicing because it's practice these principles in all our affairs, right? I wasn't doing that. I was only practicing the principles in recovery. When I started practicing some principles in other areas of my life, I got a renewed sense of hope. And around year
Mm.
5, I got put on a particular medication that happened to do its job quite well, quite efficiently, quite productively. And I then had renewed hope for myself. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about hope is because just recently I've had a lot of a resurgence of hope in my life and
Nice.
a lot of really positive things happening with me.
Can you share
And
those two in your
y-
story now? Okay.
yeah, I will for sure. I'm stoked about them. So
Mm.
I I had hope that um life would get better, but I didn't know what that looked like, right? Um, and I had resigned myself to a number of things in recovery. Like you kind of touched on it a little bit when you said, like letting go of some of the dreams of the past and those markers for success. So I had resigned myself to some things that I was convinced would never happen. So I believed that I would be obese the rest of my life. I believed that my diabetes would worsen. Um, I believed that I would need to be heavily medicated for my mental illness. I believed that I would smoke for the rest of my life.
Uh-huh.
I believed that I would never be able to work a full-time job because of my mental illness and things like that. And one by one, over the last period of time, all of those have been challenged, and all of those have been replaced with hope that those things can happen. Right? I've lost over 100 pounds.
Wow.
Today, I've I'm in the process of, through diet and exercise, reversing my need for injecting insulin. I
Oh,
I don't I haven't in the last couple of days, and my sugars have been fine. Um, I'm on day 3 of quitting smoking.
wow.
I'm still enrolled in school, and that's going pretty well. I have a part-time job that I love, and am pursuing transferring that to take up a bigger chunk of my life. I'm going to the gym. There's a lot of things that are happening, and it's the tip of the iceberg, right? It's the journey in all those areas is just starting.
Now, just for someone who's
Wow.
new to this podcast, I know you've said it on other ones, but can you tell everybody how many years you're into your program? Just because I think it's important for them to see that some things are going to come even later, you know?
hmm hmm I've 15 years clean,
Woo!
almost 15 and a half, probably over 15 and a half. Yeah. And I recognize too, and this is really important, is that I recognize that um, where that source of hope came from. Because with some things, motivation is good to get you started, but you need
Mhm.
discipline to keep going.
Well said.
And so for me to foster that discipline, I remember the people and the situations that are in my life that allowed me to feel that hope in the first place. So
Mhm.
Nice.
that would be
That's
my
very nice.
answer.
Wow, that was awesome,
That's very
Scotty.
nice.
And for anybody out there, just look at that, 15 years into the program and still substantial changes. Like that's the freedom rising in his recovery right there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question, BW? Because I am the absent-minded addict, Milan.
Yes. You. Uh, okay.
It certainly
I
is.
asked you. I asked the question: when in your journey of getting clean and or sober did you realize what hope truly is? And I said, and how is it different now?
Well, okay. I think that right at the start, hope used to have a tinge of jealousy
Ooh.
in it. And
Hmm.
like I've hoped for a lot of things that I saw other people have.
Hmm.
And and as much as I'd like to say that, that there wasn't jealousy, that would be lying.
No,
So
that's beautiful honesty.
I'm trying to come clean on the honesty. And you know also I think that hope, even in my early recovery, and even now it's almost impossible to not have some expectation associated with hope. Like
Yeah.
I would like to hope I stay clean today. And I kind of am starting to have a little bit of faith, which is in some respects a bit of an expectation that if I follow my program today, I will be, you know?
Hmm.
Um,
Well, yeah.
and like, like,
I have a talking point on that, by the way, I just thought of. So
okay, yeah,
but we'll
put
get
a
to it.
note. And before we go to Brian answering the question, you could do it because otherwise I'll just forget where I'm going right now. But, you know, hope for me definitely used to come with a timeline. It used to come generally from without, like a lot of the things I hoped for. And now, as I'm getting further in my program, I'm really diving into myself. and and I'm also, learning a lot about how things change with me. And um um I don't know if I told you, BW, but last Wednesday, best quote ever on the show is, "This is not a program of self-improvement. This is a program of surrender."
Yeah.
And so now, it's about how I can how I can get a better surrender happening, how I can transfer my surrender for my addiction into my defects. And so
Yeah.
it's like, even in the last week, my version of hope has shifted, because I certainly believe in how it's working for my addiction. Like, my hope is faith
Hmm.
about that surrender. So
Yeah.
now, I just need to use that same sort of surrender for my defects and shortcomings. And, and I have absolutely no reason not to believe it would work.
Mm.
So,
Beautiful.
so, so my hope is really high on that, and
Yeah.
the thing that, the thing that's different now is that, I'm really understanding that I'm not in control of the timeline. Even if I don't
Ooh.
like it, it's like, I can hope all day long, but I'm not going to be the one that measures the length of the race I'm on. Like, finish
Wow.
line is not where I get to put it anymore. And then consequently, you know, getting rid of that expectation of it should be inside that timeline is just a never ending
Oh.
struggle. So I'm going to leave that there, but I want you to say your point that you were talking about, Scotty, if you remember.
Okay. Yes, I do
Yep.
remember.
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you for that, because I think it's an important process. And so I don't know how, like, this. There's lots of different 12-step fellowships, right? And
Mhm.
Cocaine Anonymous, they have their own symbol, right? Every it's one of the cool things is the symbol is also very translatable. But anyway, their symbol is just hope, faith, courage. And I always really, really, really liked that, because in the beginning, like I said, like, hope was the first thing I was feeling. And my hope, as I stuck around, I got more evidence of hope in my life. And the evidence allowed me to switch from hope to faith, right? Because I
Mhm.
had faith, like Milan was saying, that if I keep doing things as they've been laid out for me, I'll stay clean. So I have faith in my life that I'll stay clean. And the longer I'm practicing that faith, because one of the things that I think is very important in my journey is that the reward of faith is more faith,
Yeah.
The
That's very
Lord of
true.
faith is more faith. I love that.
right?
This is
And
true.
I've experienced that directly in my life. So
Yeah.
as I'm learning to faith and lean into my higher power, that allows me to act in courage, right? That
Hmm.
allows me to face life on its own terms.
Very
So
said. Well said.
that's what I was. That's what came to mind.
Nice. And now, BW, do you want to answer your own question?
Sure, Ward. Um, yeah. So for myself, um, the very first individual, I'll just quickly talk about like the very first little minute. It was like I met someone who told me to meet someone else, who took me somewhere else, who which then led to me meeting someone else who told me I needed to meet someone else. And that someone else was the person that took me through this process, and it changed my life. And so just saying yes to like the things that I would not have said yes to uh, earlier in my life, I would have been like, thanks, but no thanks. Or like, I might do that. And I don't know. I just said yes to a few things, which guided me to um, the person that ended up being so influential in my life. And then after that, being told what needed to be done, I kept building on that. So like, like the relief of the anxiety, the lack of physical poison, like that constant like struggling every day with that, like, abuse of my body, like every one of these things allowed me to feel a little more hopeful, because there was I don't like the word reward, but there was a bit of a reward for doing the right thing, if that makes sense. But that's how I think we are guided, which is the faith. That is like, this is what happens when you don't put that in your body. This is what happens when you do something esteemable. This is what happens when you help somebody else. This is what happens when you do that for more than a week. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, like I have to admit, like every little thing, I was like, okay, like I was chasing a bit of a reward, but it wasn't like the old way. It was more of like I really enjoyed the benefit of having done what I used to not do. And the other thing I would add is it was around the 3 or 4 month mark where I sat down with someone I had used for other things in my life, like therapy. And I sat with this gal that had talked to me many, many years earlier in my life. And I was processing family stuff and whatnot. And similar to some of the other things we try before acknowledging like the reality of our addiction or our substance abuse is like, I had no trouble talking about what my parents had done and this and that, but I had never really totally come clean about my own inadequacies, or let's call them needs or challenge or, genetic, whatever, like all the different things that we have to take into consideration when we get honest about how we're navigating our own life. And I remember sitting with her and like very emotionally, I don't know why it was so impactful, but I let her know that I had like gone on this journey and that I had not been drinking for a certain amount of time, roughly 4 months, which is, a humble beginning. But at the time it was major. Like I was like, I haven't done this in 4 months. I'd never done that before since I was like an early teenager. And I could tell she knew that I was sincere and that like this something big was changing. And I said to her, I said, I think this is the first time I've ever been honest with you, like actually honest, where there's like an actual real conversation, because that door had been opened in my own heart, which was allowing me to no longer hide behind the facts of myself. And I kept trying to find solutions outside of me, like maybe if I can process this family stuff, I won't do this anymore. And it's like, anyway, I got a lot of hope around that time. I felt this deep connection to the process around that 4 month mark. And the other part of the question is, and how is it different now? I think the greatest thing would be that acknowledgement of the faith. I will admit too, you used the word expectation with the hope. I definitely had expectations for how my life would pan out now that I'm on the right track. You know what I mean? And so that's where my faith has to come in heavy, because when things don't go the way I'm hoping, I still succumb to some of those old wounds. And I'm like, things don't work out. I can tell myself a negative story about how this isn't working. And so that's where I really need to hunker into like the faith part. And then the other word you used was discipline. If you come unwound when the things aren't going exactly as planned and you don't exercise the faith and the discipline, I think you can find yourself at any stage of this recovery process losing hope again. And that's scary. If I'm honest.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, Scotty, you got a question for me? Or like you said, you had a couple points.
I did, but that last question was one of my points. So,
okay, do you want to say the other one, and then we can?
The other one was like, when did you first feel hope?
Yep.
So
and I would. Yeah, my first moment of hope was the second I opened my eyes after dying in that hospital. Felt like there was a sense of relief, and there was definitely just some kind of like hope that things had changed right inside that moment. Like I knew that something was over, and I had some hope that I wasn't going back. BW.
First. Well, yeah, I think I probably already touched a bit on it's like it's really hard to pinpoint. I think it was around yeah, that 3 or 4 month mark, like I knew there was hope every day.
You knew there was hope, or you felt hope, though? Because the question is, when do you feel hope?
Yeah, I felt hope each of those days leading up to it, but I think it was in that, like, quarter year mark where I was like, it was the difference between knowing you could like do something for a certain amount of time, but like it wasn't sustainable, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Yeah.
It'd be like
yeah.
living in a tent for 3 months. Like it would be, you know, probably cold, damp, and frustrating and whatever, but anybody could do it, but like you wouldn't want to do it for the rest of your life, kind of thing. And I felt like it was a notch above tent living. I felt like it was like I might actually be able to do this. And at that point, I realized that it wasn't me. It took a lot of different people and acknowledging the lack there of my own power, which changed the whole thing too. Because as long as I take credit for what was happening, I think I'm missing that fundamental thing, like you were talking about, the surrender. Man, these words are becoming big, and I feel like I felt it in that 3-4 month mark. That's when I felt it like deeply. I started feeling gratitude more than
Mm,
hope. I started feeling gratitude then. Like I could feel this warm shit churning inside me, and I was like, ooh, like I feel this. I feel connected to this, and that was a big change for me.
mhm,
Nice. And
Yeah.
you,
mhm.
Scotty?
Like I said, right, I felt it without knowing I was feeling it. But,
Okay.
but then when there was a certain specific event that happened to me in early recovery, and it probably would have been um around the 5 or 6 month mark, so similar to Brian's timeline there. But um, I was at a meeting and it was hockey playoffs, and the Oilers were in the playoffs, and um, I'm one of the members at that meeting invited a couple of us over to their place to order pizza and watch hockey, and that was the first time I've ever did fellowship. Right before that, I was late getting to the meeting on time, so I didn't have to chit chat too much, and leaving pretty quick when it was done.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't really engaging in the fellowship that much.
Mm-hmm.
But I had been in the area for a month or two, so people did know who I was. So we went over to this woman's house for pizza and hockey, and that was like a real eye-opening, fundamentally changing my outlook on recovery, because
Mm-hmm.
I realized that those people that are in the room, they got to spend 23 hours outside that room and staying
Oh
clean
yeah.
too, right? So it, they became human to me.
Yeah.
Before, like, I was able to relate to these people way deeper than I was able to. And I think that was for me a transition from knowing to feeling when it comes to the fellowship. And there was a lot of hope there too, because some of those people that went to watch hockey had more clean time than I did, right? And I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
if they did it, and they're human, and they have the same issues that I have, but they were able to do it. So that really internalized a lot of that hope.
That's pretty amazing.
Nice. Yeah, it's one thing to talk recovery in a bubble wrap, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
another thing to go out in situations that were, going to Mexico this winter was a litmus test. It
Mm-hmm.
was like,
Mm-hmm.
was I going to crave? Was I going to feel whatever? And I just bathed in recovery down there and really didn't have that issue at all. So that was a good feeling for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Nice.
get it. And and also too, just going down there looking for a recovery community. Guess what? There's one everywhere. This
Oh yeah.
world is covered by recovery communities. And if
Yeah.
you look for it, every little dinky town will even have a meeting.
Yeah.
And
That's
if you
right.
Yeah.
can't find one, then jump online. But if they don't got a meeting, they'll have the internet, like for sure.
Yeah.
Even in the hills of Mexico. Okay, I'm going to ask a question here to you, B Dubs. We all bring hope and answers sometimes, even when we don't feel it ourselves. One day clean is a miracle, whether or not it's ever followed by another. Can you share a story about how the miracle of someone's clean time was hope for you?
Yeah. So I had quickly touched it on another one there. I had a couple people that I was really close with that I used to do a lot of active indulgence with that had taken a run at the process. And yeah, it was one of my best buddies. I can't recall if it was 1 or 2 years, but I was like, if this dude is doing this, then I got to at least take this into consideration. I still fell into the category of really wanting to do it without going to meetings, etc. I was like really hoping that I could just like push up my way out of it or get a better job and all that. And he had his own journey and ended up kind of taking another sniff at the roses and then found his way back. He's doing really well. He's a beautiful person, but that was incredibly inspiring. And then once I actually was part of the community, I had a similar experience Scotty mentioned where like everybody was just like a character that was doing this thing, and I wasn't as aware of everybody's time, but I was aware of certain people's time. The one that made the most impact on me was my sponsor. Like it was one of these things where I think he had a decade when he started helping me, and I just believed him. I was like, okay, like that's like a chunk of life, that's a real chunk of life. And then I could see some of the blessings that he had kind of had come through during that time. And that was enough for me to just be like, I don't know what this is going to look like, but I would love to have my life go in this direction. And so that was really cool. And then let me try to think. 1 years, like young people with 1 years. Like I think I saw a few girls taking 1 years, and their families were there, and there was tears, and I was just like, oh my god, like this is amazing, Like I don't know, that sort of stuff. To this day, I just love that stuff. So yeah, there was a lot of different little experiences like that that made a huge impact on me.
Awesome. And Scotty, do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I think I got it. Look, it comes to my mind, and I take the risk of sounding a bit egotistical with this one, but that's not where I'm coming from. But I think one of the most impactful birthdays, because I would agree that birthdays hit home, and especially 1 years, like you said, like the 1 year is really important. I find when someone takes 18 months, I find that very inspiring because I struggled a lot at 18 months. There was
Mm-hmm.
no one, I've heard the 18 months blues, and
Really?
no one had ever really prepared me for that. But I think the first time I had a sponsee take time was very moving for me, to stand up in front of everybody and present a medallion to somebody who I'd grown close with, and
Uh,
just see them have that sort of success. And I know that I'm not egotistical enough to say that I played a huge role, but I know I played a role, but so much of that was their footwork, their resilience in the face of hardship, for their faith in their higher power. And the fact that I could be a part of that coming from the other side that way was very powerful for me.
no doubt.
And I mean, I don't have a lot of sponsees. I never have. So it was a very personal experience. And it was like a real thing, like this program works. right?
Yeah.
Program works. And to be a part of that in somebody's life is a very beautiful thing.
Mm.
Nice.
Mm.
Yeah. I would say that, probably for me, if I think back, being a musician, like everything was sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Mm.
Like it literally, the whole subculture is um advertised as that in
Mm.
fiction or in life, and so at options there was a support worker, Adam. And I remember one of my first days there, we would walk to a store. It was like the big outing, whether it was Starbucks or whether it was the grocery store. And we'd get to walk with a couple support workers, and it would be like our walk and our outing and also our treats, because everybody ate a shit ton of treats and treatment. Treatment.
Yes.
But anyway, you know, um, Adam was a musician, and I got into options on October 13th. And so upcoming was his Halloween gigs. And so it was a real inspiration to me to be able to see and talk to somebody who was navigating things that I thought, oh my God, like I'm just gonna have lost these things in my life.
Yeah.
And like there he was playing 3 shows for Halloween. His tip was show up late and leave early. Was like, and then he's like, nothing good's happening after midnight. And
No doubt.
and I,
Mhm.
I was inspired by it, and it made me really happy to see. And it was because music was my lifeline of, like, when I got to withdraw from other people, music is what I do when I'm by myself.
Mm.
So it was like I didn't want to be like, oh well, music was part of using, I'm going to stop it. And at that point it was really kind of like, what am I continuing, who am I continuing things with, who can I continue things with you
Yeah.
know and I definitely think it was for sure Adam for me at that point. That was the single most impactful person on that front, because he was still
Nice.
continuing to do a lot of the things that I was afraid I was going to lose.
That's a good point.
Hey,
Mm.
B Dubs, you got a question for Scotty?
I do. Ooh. So we sort of maybe grades this, but the question I came up with is how can you compare your hope now as it was like when you were a child, like before you even had this problem with addiction? I
Mm.
think I kind of touched it on the intro. It's like, what what was it like to have hope as a young person compared to now? What's the main difference between your hope then and now?
Mm. This may sound weird, but gratitude.
Okay.
So I think that as a child, um, and I had my life planned out, by the way. Like, you know what I mean? Like I had a vision of how my life was gonna go.
Yeah.
And it changed a little bit, but it didn't change too much. So uh do you remember, okay, you remember we had a day uh at my school. I went to a private school, so it may have not been the same for everybody, but we had a day where it was dress up, it was career day. So dress up as the career that you wanted to have when you grew up, right? And I dressed up as a scientist. That's what I wanted to be from a very young age. I've always
Yeah.
I've always been a science guy. Like both my parents were mathematicians. Um, so it was very much like that. And all the steps that I took growing up were modeled after that one way or the other. And the first let's say high school, I realized that that was going to come true if I stayed on the path that I was on. Right. And I got accepted to a university. I was playing football at that university. It's a very well-known university. It was a good place. Um, and my hopes were coming true,
Uh-huh.
right? Because I was a student on the football team. I was doing research, even though I was a first year student. I was doing
Yeah, yeah.
research. I was, so all these things were full. And that's kind of like the pride before the fall in my story, where I had
Mhm.
everything. A few things happened that um, I didn't have the life skills to deal with, and my addiction took off, and I was done. So now, um, and I don't. Okay, so I want to make a little distinction too. Um, I think for anybody that's grown up playing sports, you get to a point when you realize that it's done,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And this, I had realized that with a few things before, but this is a different type of fall than just realizing I'll never make the NFL, right? Like
Sure.
it was a hard fall into addiction, and the hope that I have today comes not from having everything I want,
Yes.
but having crawled out of hell, basically. So now,
Sorry.
right? So now the hope that I have is tied with gratitude because I know that it's more of and I mean I still will probably never get my university degree, and I've come to accept that it doesn't it's not a soul crushing thing anymore
Mhm.
because I can still do and experience hope for the future, right? So but it comes with gratitude out of that. So
That was beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, it made me, think that how how little gratitude I had for basics as a
hmm
child.
hmm
Like I expected there to be food. I expected there to be warmth. I expected there to be shelter. And like I remember saying to my parents, I didn't choose to have me, you did. So I'm your responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't ask to be born. But so like I remember being that entitled as a kid. And so it just took me right back, like, and hopes, like, man,
Oh.
I had a pretty convoluted sense of hopes. Like I was hoping I was getting lucky with any girl going because I had really low self-esteem and I didn't, like I was like, please, just let those nipples be mine. You know, but like really for someone who was unsuccessful with girls and had low self-esteem, like that's a real big hope when you're a kid,
Yeah.
and uh um and as far as life goals go, like I always thought I would be a teacher because my mom was a teacher and I was really good at math, and there was just like you're going to be an accountant, a statistician, an actuary, or a teacher. If you're good at math back in those days, that was like the four options. And
Mhm.
maybe computers, but I really kind of got screwed out of the computer avenue. I went to one high school. You couldn't take computers till grade 10. And then I switched high schools. And if you didn't take computers in grade 9, you couldn't take computers.
Mhm.
So there I was the rest of high school with no computers. And it was just such a weird thing. People are like, how did you not? And I was like, I didn't because of stupid policies. But,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so like, and then it was like, there was an expectation of me to go to university.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't have called
Mhm.
it a desire by me, right? That
Okay.
wasn't my hope. That was
Mhm.
Yeah.
almost like my chain. And like I remember like my father who passed when I was really young, he was an electrician and trades were never on the table. To my
Right.
mom, trades were like a lesser level of occupation.
Mhm.
And like I really, like because you're not working with your mind, because you're working with your body. And it was just like coming from a farming family, it was like getting to work with your mind was something that was more highly thought of or
Yeah, of
whatever.
course.
And so like my hopes were really like not present, and now, now I feel like I kind of have a life purpose through this program,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
first of all, my the first thing that I recognized that as a major goal that came to me last summer was my goal to learn acceptance, you know, but now it's also to better my surrender,
Nice.
to make that more all encompassing. And so like instead of having this like physical result in my goals as I did when I was young, like
Yeah.
my goal was to score whatever drug I wanted, to hopefully have an orgasm with a girl, if not by myself, you know, and but like now it's really my goal, my hopes are in a spiritual direction that is
Very
like
nice.
that is potentially probably never ever going to be fully met, and I'm
That's
okay
very
with
awesome.
that. So
That's
yeah, I'd say that's my answer.
great
And
answer. I think
did anybody tell you guys they love you today? Because I did.
not yet.
Well,
Not
I
yet.
think I did twice now at least.
Okay, maybe. Okay.
B
Love you.
Dubs.
I came up with a question, but
Okay, so he's
do it
got to answer
whenever.
his own question. You
Yep.
remember it though. Don't forget it.
Awesome. I love what you guys both had to say. I was kind of hoping that that would be sort of what came from it because that's how I looked at it too. I definitely remember like those incremental moments of recognition that like, oh, I probably won't become this and maybe that will never happen. And then man, I tell you, this thing had me at a young age. I was like 16 and I was already like, I'll be frank. I was going to save it for another question, but like I started losing hope at like 15, 16. Like a few things happened in my family that were so significant and so earth shattering. And like I just literally went from being like a happy, hopeful, what I considered a well-rounded individual, probably dealing with some self-esteem, maybe like, needing a little too much attention, wanting to be funny, these types of sort of innocent childhood things, but they ended up being very real later on. And by like mid-teens, I was like already talking down to myself, admitting in front of people that I wasn't going anywhere. Booze had me like it was like constant pursuit of changing how I felt with substance. And so basically at that point in time, I still was quite driven by the social standards. Like you mentioned that you had to go to university. I was 17 when I moved to Halifax to go to Dalhousie, and that definitely wasn't something that I like really longed for. I basically got into a handful of schools, saw where a few of my really good friends were going, and I was like, I guess I'll go over there. And next thing you know, I'm like living in an apartment with one other person, drinking on a daily basis, and like things got very real very fast for me. Like 20 years old, I was just on my hands and knees calling my mom crying. I was like, there's something wrong with me. Like there is something wrong with me. Like I can't stop
Mhm.
drinking. I'm like so anxious. And um so yeah, it all happened quite fast. And so the question was hope as a child. Yeah, by then I did like anything at all that I had thought life would be, like my structure, my sense of self, poof. Like it was terrifying. What I went through in my early 20s was it was an identity crisis of some kind. I basically was like, yeah, completely unraveled. And looking back on it, it makes sense as to why, how I am, like the kind of makeup I am as a person, what I was told I was supposed to be, and what was actually going on in my life. It just all added to this like like just I don't know. That was it was like it was almost like it was meant to be. Like I was meant to fall apart at that age. I can't explain it. Like I just couldn't continue pretending that things were going okay. And so I really like what you said about the gratitude part. I like to look at it like now my hope is in far different motivations. Like you said, you crawled out of hell, and I burst out laughing because I know it was. I almost feel like I'm gonna cry. It was horrible, and like, yeah, there's something very beautiful about knowing that that's possible when you get a little bit of whatever they call security in our social instincts, like when you do have your needs met or when you do have the things that we all work so hard for, instead of it needing to be something grander, it was always more, faster, louder, funnier, sexier, more. It was like, what can we do to add to this? And now I'm quite a lot better at just being like, this is good enough. It doesn't mean that I'm not still in pursuit of things or like wanting to better things or become more disciplined. It just means that I'm not constantly feeling lack within myself. So the outside is I'm a lot more grateful for what is appearing outside of me because I'm much more like at peace within myself. And that's what it was before. There was something missing in here that constantly made me feel like things were missing out here. And this feels like it's a little more full, which means that what's out of me looks a little less void or whatever. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Empty.
I love that.
Empty, yeah. So that's the difference now.
I like that.
That was wicked. Scotty, do you remember that question?
I do.
Okay.
So we've all established kind of how we began hope and how we foster hope. What would you, if you have a specific or a general thing that you could say has been the biggest challenge to keeping that hope alive?
Okay. Yeah. I would say it's real easy. It's like faltering in my quest.
Yeah.
Like, my misunderstanding that my shortcomings and defects were my responsibility until quite recently, like, and then just like, why aren't I getting better with this? Why aren't I getting better with this?
Oh.
Probably because I'm not the one who's supposed to get better with it. I'm supposed to get better at letting it go. And so, like my misconceptions really, got to a point where it's just like, am I just a broken deviant? Like for real, like
I know.
it's just like, and inside that, inside that thought is a slight crack or shattering of hope, unless I can, maintain my discipline in my program. And fortunately for me, I'm one fucking stubborn motherfucker. Like, like even if I'm having a shit day, I'm still going to get up and do this program tomorrow. Like I've got a lot of friends who won't consistently commit to a gratitude list. Sure. And I'm like, that commitment is what makes you grateful. Like on the days where I'm like, fuck, what am I going to think of here? Because I'm not feeling it. It's doing that list that brings gratitude into those first moments of my day. And, like there's so much where we have to have a discipline in our program, or we're going to either not get to that next level that we're hoping to get to, or we're not even going to hold on to what we have.
Yeah.
Like it's real easy to slip backwards into a negative mindset. Yeah. And so, like, without hope, I'm hopeless. Bottom line. And I'm going to leave my answer there because I love that. That was a great question, Scotty. I love you too. Yeah.
Is it me now?
Yeah.
The challenge of keeping it. You just said something that was important. Yeah, so like the Harry God box, like the that gentleman always would call me out. I would always say like, I have to do this or I'm going to do that. And he would always remind me like, you're going to do that. And he would always point out that it wasn't me. It was this needing to allow the process to unfold. I was really blessed that like the group of guys I hung with there, a lot of them were quite old and they had some like really good little things. Like the one other gentleman sat near me would talk about like just cooperating with time. That's all he would say. He'd say, you just need to learn how to cooperate with time. And that was that whole like, when is it going to happen? You know? And so to answer Scotty's question, cooperate with time. Man. And so I always looked at bad things happening or labeling it bad or like the opposite of what you were hoping and or things that you take personally because it really seems like it's happening to you. I always equated that with punishment. I always equated that to I'm not good enough or I'm not doing right. And I would get so frustrated, you know, because like as a young person, if I didn't get it right, I would just come unwound, you know, like I also wanted to be given the keys right now. Like, give me the keys to the boat. Okay, you've shown me how to fish. Now I'm going fishing. Like, I just wanted to be able to do it myself. But the truth is, it's because I wanted to show the person that showed me how to do it that I could do it and that I was good at it and wanted the recognition of being able to do the things well. And so when I didn't do it well, or if I was criticized, or if I lost, if they took the keys back, I would come unwound because I would think that I wasn't okay or I wasn't good enough. And I just always equated things, challenges popping up that it was fundamentally because I was not good enough. And that was this ridiculous story that I, to this day, tell myself when things don't go well. And it's like, if I was good enough, this wouldn't have happened. Or if I had tried, I guess you have to try even harder than that because I thought I was trying. So I don't know what other people are doing because it seems like I'm really trying here and I don't know why this isn't happening. But I don't know, like that when they do the columns and you do the ambitions and like the resentment built on like whether it's real or perceived, any threat to your ambitions, that concept of losing what you have or not getting what you want, like that was my whole life. And so to keep hope now is back to the discipline because honest to God, I've had a few things happen in the 10 years that I've been doing this where I definitely feel like the old me being like, this isn't fair. This is bullshit. Like this is bullshit. Like, whoa. And I'm not getting what I'm putting out. I'm not getting back what I'm putting in. And I can definitely feel anxious again. Once I'm anxious and I'm telling myself a story about that not good enough or like people don't recognize my value and all this shit, like I am not on the right track. And so to combat that, I have to really, really, really hunker into and have conversations with people I trust. One of the greatest assets I've had now is to talk to people that know this process, that I trust, that can guide me back to proper thinking or healthier thinking. And to keep hope, the other main thing, sorry to go on here, but the main thing is to live in one day. For me, if I live in a day, like I can plan a few things, like I know where I'm going on Wednesday, but if I don't stay in the day with the faith and I like start adding up the things that are not going well, I definitely become like less spiritually fit. I become very powerless again, and it's a scary feeling. So yeah, staying present and not adding unnecessary future.
Love that. Scotty, you want to answer your own question, brother?
I do.
I love it.
Those are some really great points. I really agree that like I can really resonate with the staying in the day. I'm learning to plan a little bit in advance just because society works that way.
Yeah.
But I do have to keep my focus on, what I'm doing. And I like this gratitude, Milan. Like, I try to pray pretty quickly in the morning. It's like soon after I get up, and I always start my prayer with, thank you for the opportunity of another day. Right?
Nice.
So I always start my prayers, but and in asking that question, what came to mind, the 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 hardest struggle with my hope is how many people die.
Man.
Like, and you can come at it from a few angles, but like, I can remember the first time I had a friend overdose. He was in the program. He had 18 months. He owned his own company. He was a concrete pourer. He he was a really really good guy.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, one uh, Thursday he went missing, right? And then we were doing fellowship Friday night, and they found him in a hotel room. So literally, once was too many, right?
Yeah.
Like he didn't make it, and that was like that broke something for me. It,
Mm.
I think it broke a level of naiveness where you figure, you know, you got kind of like your crew and everybody, you know, people have different amounts of clean time, but you just kind of expect that you'll all make it. And I'm into a couple of funerals, more funerals than weddings, is what my friend says, you know,
Yeah.
and it's hard. And I wish I could tell people that it got easier, but it always strikes that chord, right?
That's a good
And
point.
and for me, it challenges my hope because I feel like, I mean, and I know Narcotics Anonymous saved my life. I fully believe that it can save anyone's life, any addict at all
Mm.
can get clean through the 12 steps. But it reminds me that no matter how much time I have, my disease is still fatal. Right? My disease is still fatal. And um, but the lesson it's taught me is to appreciate the moment.
Yeah.
I like that, you know, like there's a daily reading and it talks about how we no longer sell our tomorrows for today. We no longer sell our tomorrows. So we're able, if I live in the present, then that's the best course of action.
Hmm.
You know?
Agreed. That's a very good point.
I used to always say I was trading life. I'd say
Yeah,
I was trading like 7 days for one on the days where I wouldn't sleep. Like
yeah.
I knew whatever I was doing in my body was way more damaging than one day of an existence. And it was just like, you know, I was like, that's my admission fee, trading
Hmm.
life today.
Yeah, yeah.
And just stupid enough to keep doing it and addicted enough not to care, you know?
Mhm. Knowing you're in pain, but not knowing what to do. Because
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was the cycle I was in, right? Like I'm using, so I'm creating psychosis. I don't know how to emotionally cope with psychosis. So I do whatever I can to manage my emotions, which is using, which
Which,
creates more psychosis,
yeah,
which, right? And I just downward spiral.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that 100%. Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question, BW.
Okay.
What first appeared to us as a way out now offers us a way in, into a life we hadn't imagined, into joy, hope, into growth that never stops. We continue to get better. We continue to discover new ways to live, new freedom, and new paths to explore. Would you share what hopes or expectations you had coming into the program and what they've turned into?
Yes. That's so cool. I think that kind of nuzzles into the previous kind of shares about keeping the hope. I really like what Scotty said. I mean, and I've seen it. I've lost family members. I have current active family. Um, I just want to also make it clear when I say like, oh, when things don't work out for me, I'm not just saying like me, it's the stuff that I also care about. So it is still self, but it's like the world around you, like the stuff that you were hoping would be healthy and other people that you love. It's not just wanting to get what I want, you know what I mean? Like, what can I get out of this? You know, just wanted to kind of make that clear.
I think
But
everybody was thinking you meant that. No, I'm
I
kidding.
know. No.
I was just joking.
No, that's awesome. Um, so let's just call it what it is. It is hard. It is hard. So I had a chat with Sponsee. Also, I've mentioned about like that first year was again, I equate it to the level of surrender and the significance of contrast. Going from this to this was so significant. You couldn't help but bathe in the newness. You know, it was like so good. And I also maybe shared what I heard this other person say on another little clip was like, if you walk around with a sack of rocks for the first 5 minutes after you drop them, you're born again. And then, you know, a day later, you're still that person that no longer carries the rocks, but it's your new normal, as they say, or what becomes um, a more natural existence. So the contrast isn't as wonderful as it was early on. But if you really think about it, like that's why that gratitude, like you mentioned, is so important because if I'm not acknowledging what's going well, I'm just in what I consider my new natural state. And then when you add challenges to that, the rocks keep piling on again. But the truth of the matter is, like, it's a completely different luggage. Like, what I carry now, there's actual solutions to. I can differentiate between where I'm right and, or it's not right and wrong, but where I can take ownership for my part and then I have a choice. Whereas before I did not have a choice. I was literally enslaved by my mind, my emotion, my addiction. And now I actually have a way out. I can choose to not take it because of fear, whether that's staying in unhealthy dynamics, you know, staying somewhere where I've convinced myself this is not what I actually want in my life, but I'm too scared to leave because of finances, all these different things. I really do believe that the difference now is that I do have a choice. It's just whether I have the courage or the faith to make that change, you know, like the wisdom to know the difference. Whereas before, I literally didn't have a choice. I was enslaved by it.
Nice.
Is that sort of what we were
I
talking
love
about?
it. I love it.
All right.
Scotty,
We're talking kind of about where our hope is today.
like what hopes or expectations you had coming into the program and what they've turned into.
Mm. So coming in, I think it started just like maybe I can get clean, or maybe the pain will go away, one of the two.
Mhm.
And I think so. I had a couple of years bit, and then I relapsed, then I came back, and for a while there, that hope kind of died. And then when I came back this last time, came into NA, um, I think it came back pretty quick. But I think that by that point, I was running on a bit of faith. And the faith was I knew I could get clean because I knew that I had a bit of time before and I knew it worked. Um, really, though, I think today I have a very positive outlook on life.
Nice.
I don't know that I have a whole lot of hopes, but I have a whole lot of faith.
Nice.
And like I still fear relapse because I know that I wouldn't survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to use is to die. And it's gonna be like that for the rest of my life.
Mm.
Um, but I have faith because I've seen the program work and my God work and so many other people, it's really egotistical for me to say it's not going to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't carry that terminal uniqueness around anymore. So I think that the hopes and dreams I had coming in of getting clean, maybe having a family, maybe finishing schooling, all that kind of stuff, they're not weighted the same as um, they were in the beginning because I have faith that a lot of those things are going to happen.
Nice.
Um, and it goes back to the whole faith courage thing too, right? With the CA logo. Yeah, and it manifests itself in a lot of different ways, right? Like I can say one of the biggest things is because one of the things when I had lost hope of ever being in a committed relationship, like probably 2.5, 3 years ago. No, 2 years, 2.5, two. Anyway, sorry. Uh, I remember praying to God, saying I give up. I'm not gonna date anyone anymore. I'm just gonna resign myself to living alone.
Huh.
And then, uh, like within a month, I met my wife.
That's awesome, brother.
So
That's
when I
awesome.
when I look at that stuff, it's like every time I try to put my higher power in a box, he gets out. So for me, it's more like I hope I can stay clean. I hope I can be content. But I have faith that I know if I do what I need to do on the daily basis, that it'll happen.
Nice.
Like and in that selling your tomorrows for today kind of thing, I very much believe that for one day I can do almost anything. So for one day I can not use.
Mhm.
You know, my wife and I are on a keto diet, so we wake up in the morning and we're like, just for today, we're gonna eat clean, right? Because I know that for a day I can handle that. When I start
Nice.
going like this is a side note, but it's an example. Um, it's Easter's coming up, right? So they have the caramel cream eggs, the caramel
Yeah.
the
Oh,
right the cream eggs got, and I'm dying for one. Like I've been obsessing about these eggs for like the last 2 weeks.
Surrender it.
Yeah, really though.
that's great.
But but that's the thing, right? So, but I can say, you know what, I won't have one today. I won't. Like I can handle one day. If I have to
Yeah.
go, I'm never gonna have one for the rest of my life. That's a little harder pill to swallow. But I know that for today, for today, I can do it. So for today, through my higher power, I can do what I need to do. So
I appreciate that.
I love it. Awesome. And so, yeah, I think right away, I was like zero faith coming into the program and a shit ton of hope, shit ton of hope. I was low on the expectations though, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
Like I didn't know sober people. So I didn't really have a belief in the program. And but today a lot of that hope, I'm glad you touched on that there, Scotty, about faith. Like, you know, hope, little hope seeds can grow into faith. And they can grow
Definitely.
into big, powerful trees of faith. Like if I follow my program today, I got faith that I'm going to wake up straight tomorrow. And
hmm
I'm not guaranteeing something. What I'm saying is that right here in my heart, when I think about it, I know that if I keep doing that same shit, I'm going to stay out of trouble, because part of my program is not going into a fucking trap house and sitting
hmm
there watching people do rip after rip or whatever, and Like it's just I don't put myself in the lion's den. And today,
Yeah.
like my hopes are that I continue to evolve and grow inside this program, that I'm able to keep helping people the way I am through sponsorship, but also
Mm.
through things like this podcast, conversations, with a newcomer at a meeting, like they're not all going to turn into my sponsees, but I know that shares from other people helped me when I was starting out.
Mhm.
And I'd like to think that, one of the things I'm hoping that I'm considerate enough to be considering the newcomer in my shares when I
Yeah.
am sharing, because, like I was looking for any tip out there when I was starting out, and that tip sometimes is just a sentence about a thought process. And guaranteed, I wasn't great at recovery thought because I was great at using thought, you know?
Mhm.
And so I'd say for me, that's kind of how it's changed and evolved. B Dubs, you got another question for Scotty?
I do. And this, yeah, I have two more. One, I think it's important to go to this space, even though it might be a little.
Now you said you had you said that you had to split in 10 minutes, right?
I think after this round of the three of us answering this question,
Yep.
I'm going to have to go.
Okay, so I'm putting it on to a 3-minute timer. We're gonna call this lightning round. Here we go.
Thanks. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Okay.
Oh,
I'm sad to ask, but do you recall when you lost hope?
ooh, little
Mm.
ending with a sizzler.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, then when when I first cleaned up, I was dealt with a lot of psychosis. I
Mm.
hadn't been formally diagnosed, and when I stopped using, my symptoms alleviated, and I went
Wow.
back to being normal Scotty.
Mm.
And then probably a year in, they started coming back. So I went through a second prodromal phase, they call it,
Mm.
and then into increasing levels of psychosis. And it wasn't too long into that process that I started losing hope about pretty much anything. Right?
Oh.
I couldn't even sit through an entire meeting without uh, I just would have to leave. Like I would just be too mentally screwed up to really be even present
Mm.
in the meeting.
Okay.
Um,
That's
and
very scary.
it was, uh, but there's 2 points that are redemption facts to that story.
Okay.
And one of them is, even though I was made it a habit of leaving meetings early, there was one member who once chased me out of a meeting and was
Mm-hmm.
like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Not really, but you know." But the
Yeah.
other that eventually that led me to believe that I wasn't really an addict, and I started using again.
Okay.
But but when I came back the next time, uh, people were happy to see me, despite
That's
being a lunatic and then leaving the rooms. So when people were happy to see me when I came back into Narcotics Anonymous,
yeah.
I got that hope back
That's amazing.
because we don't shoot our wounded, right?
That's true.
So even though that was a very painful process, uh, it was quickly reversed when I came back into recovery.
That's beautiful.
I love that, Scotty. Thanks for sharing on the honesty and the
Yeah.
vulnerability there. I remember standing in my bathroom and like feeling like this is gonna kill me, and then still continuing to do it.
Mm.
And the real clincher was two direct times with my wife looking me in the eyes, saying, "Are you using?" Inside my brain, everything inside me saying, "Don't lie to her. Don't lie to her." And I lied to her. Like I directly lied to her against my own will, just so that I knew I'd be, because I knew if I said I was using, I wasn't going to get to finish using what I had.
Yeah.
And I wanted to keep
Mm.
using that day.
Yeah.
And it was just like that made me feel like that was the point in my brain where it's like, you're an addict. Like that sentence was just like echoing those 2 days in my brain. You're an addict. You know, you're out of control. You're an addict. You're out of control.
Mhm.
And the problem was though is that I knew the second I said that out loud, there would be no going back.
Yes.
And I just wasn't ready to stop.
No doubt.
You know, like I was like happily killing myself. You
Yeah.
know, and when I say happily, it was like there would be one initial bit of pleasure in the morning, and then the rest of the day would be like chasing it to a painful point of like almost collapsing,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that's my response on that one. B dubs.
Thank you for sharing that. And what came to mind when you said that is like just like the lack of having any form of idea of how you could possibly face the unbearable um unknown of like actually admitting in that moment with your wife, like it's like, nope, I have to do this in order to do that because there's no way I can do that, and you didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
Wild. So when I first put that question together, I was thinking a little bit about like before I was even um aware of my alcoholism. I actually feel like around the age of 12, 13, somewhere in, like, I think I gave up. I don't know if I lost hope. I gave up. And I recognized that after I was somewhere in the middle of the step work. I was like, I think I like gave up way back there somewhere. I did. I didn't think I'd amount to anything. I sort of just had this broken, not, I don't like the word, I had a very damaged sense of self. And so I was just constantly seeking approval outside of myself. I did not have that inner resource, that knowing of a loving higher power or a community around me with people that understood or had any care for what I was going through. My own parents were inadequate. I don't mind saying that. They had no solution for me. My doctor didn't have a solution for me, and the church didn't have a solution for me. So I was like doomed, like I am doomed. So then I started seeking myself in like relationships. I was always looking for a connection. Um, Even with friends, I probably put an unnecessary amount of, um, I put like a huge emphasis on my friendships, like whatever it was to make me feel like I was somebody of significance and or people cared about me or I was connected. Those things were like my like I needed those things in order to feel like I was even alive. And I remember some of the one of the closest people in my life. This is a bold share, but attempted to take their life when I was a teenager, and that's when I kind of remember feeling like hopeless. It kind of dawned on me how like hurt and like damaged and sad people that I loved were, and I felt that same thing within myself. I had never had a thought of like wanting to leave or not be here anymore, but it was in that moment where I felt like a real disconnect from like I was like, this is bullshit, like I had concluded that my leaders were hypocrites and there were some damaged people that they had left in their wake, and I was one of them, and I was seeing the damage around me, and I'm not gonna lie, I just like kind of felt hopeless at that point, and that's when I started relying on alcohol basically to function and feel any sense of relief from that chronic inner lack I felt on a daily basis. And then I know the time's up, but I'll just quickly add, I have not felt hopeless in sobriety. And that's a miracle. That's a miracle.
Yeah.
It is, absolutely.
I
That was
felt
awesome.
very, very sad, troubled, scared, but I have not felt hopeless. So that's
So next week, the three of us are going to be embarking on the topic of the spiritual principle of discipline. And Scotty's joke of the week is,
What are the 2 fastest ways to make an addict disappear?
what?
Lend them money or become their sponsor.
Tune in next week for more recovery fun. We love you, everybody. Please help us help others. If you like what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.